lot of people like us and younger people, Gen X, Y, and Zers, who are looking at changing up their lifestyle, 10Xing their lifestyle. It's not just wealth, but it's also fitness and happiness and well-being.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life.
Zach, welcome to our first episode of our podcast.
Excited 10X, to be here, Mark.
10X for Gen XYZ. Very, very excited. This is a kind of a short time coming, but a long time coming too. We've been kind of bouncing.
We've been thinking about doing a podcast for at least a year and a half.
Yeah.
And we came up with this concept, Gen X, 10X for Gen XYZ. And I think it really resonated with both of us.
Yeah, it's great. Definitely. Because we're, obviously we're Gen Xers, and in what we do in real estate, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, but what we do in real estate, obviously, is we have a lot of the younger generations that are kind of coming up behind us that we want to help with certain things if we can.
And if you look at, absolutely. And if you look at our investor base, I would say the majority of them are Gen X, Y, and Z. We do have some baby boomers, to be sure, but we do have an awful lot of younger investors who are interested in investing with us for passive income and long-term wealth generation.
Totally. So why don't we do that? Why don't we go ahead and just talk a little bit about what we do? And then, just between us, I know what it is, but just go ahead and just tell everybody what Prosperity CRE is.
Sure. So we're a real estate investment company. And basically what we do is we pool investor funds together to invest in cash flowing commercial real estate investment opportunities. And I would say we're very opportunistic in our approach. We're very analytical. We're very data driven when we look at potential properties to acquire. And as you know, we look at hundreds of properties before we identify one that's going to meet our performance metrics and expectations. So we'll invest in multifamily, we'll invest in industrial, we like medical office buildings. But basically, we're looking for opportunities where we can generate ongoing cash flow for our investors. And we look for various strategies that we call value add strategies, where we can come in and through various ways increase the ongoing cash flow. And that also increases the overall net operating income, which has an exponential effect on the value of the property, so that when we ultimately go to sell it, we can sell it for a very strong profit.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's called forced appreciation, meaning right now it's a hot market. We don't rely solely on sales prices to increase value, quote unquote. But we actively manage the properties, the income statement, as it were, and try to find efficiencies in the expenses, and also find ways to drive revenues. Either that's with rent increases based on us putting money into the property, or other income increases, things in apartment buildings, especially things like washers and dryers that they can rent, paid parking, storage, things like that.
Right. That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And our strategy is called syndication, but we're basically bringing in passive investors who want to invest with us. And the benefits are they don't have to actively manage the investment. We do all of the asset management and oversee implementing all of our strategies. And then they get the bulk of the cash flow and the bulk of the profits. So
actually, that brings up a really good point, right? Because we have a lot of busy professionals who may want to buy real estate, just on the whole, they want to diversify their investments, or they're just getting started in some sort of investments and they know real estate is good, but once they kind of dive deeper into the cash flowing real estate part of it, they realize that, actively managing a cash flowing real estate enterprise is it's time intensive. And when you have a, full-time W-2 job, or you're working as a doctor or a dentist, or, we have a lot of those, it's very difficult to actively manage one of these properties, which takes up, time in itself. And that's what we do full time.
Yes, and it does require a fair amount of expertise. You really need to know what you're doing. There can be a learning curve in figuring out how to really do a good job at managing your real estate portfolio. It's quite different than investing in the stock market.
Right, totally. So yeah, that's great. I think that, jumping off from that, and just kind of maybe diving into what this podcast is all about, this 10X for Gen X, Y, and Z. We really, we love this idea of being able to 10X anything.
Yeah.
To just really, if you're going to do something, really go for it. Right. And try to exponentially kind of make leaps and bounds on not only your results, but growth and lifestyle and just all sorts of things that this concept of 10X could be applied to. And so I don't know about you, but I remember you sent me an article, and we can put it in the show notes for this one, but you sent me an article about this, and it just has to do with the wealth transfer, but it really kind of applies to a lot of other things. But that, the baby boomer generation, they are at the age of retirement, or some a little bit past that. And really, Generation Xers, people like us, people who were born, in the late 60s through the I'd say the late 70s, maybe early 80s. And then Generation Y, which is the proverbial millennials, which is the biggest sized generation group behind the baby boomers. They may even increase the baby boomers, I believe.
Yes.
And also the Gen Zers who are much younger. They're probably under 25 years old right around now. And they're coming into their own in terms of being an economic power themselves. But right now, the millennials are really the power. But the Gen Xers, people like us, we're actually coming into our age as mature adults who are kind of taking over a lot of things as well from the boomers, from the baby boomers. So I would say, I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but that article really put it into perspective in terms of, and we're going to talk about a lot of this hopefully during the course of the podcast. But for right now, this wealth transfer, what is it? What did you say?
It's actually, there's $70 trillion, which, to put that in perspective, that's essentially 1 year of the world's gross domestic production. $70 trillion over the next 30 years is going to be transferred from the baby boom generation as they pass away over to their heirs and relatives, et cetera. So that essentially means Gen X, Y, Zers over the next 30 years are going to get $2 to $3 trillion each year.
That's crazy.
It's an enormous transfer of wealth. I don't know if it's ever been done before.
Yeah. So. And that also really includes, I'm assuming that includes not only just in cash terms, but there's a lot of kind of real assets that are involved with that. The transfer of the equity or actual real estate. We're talking transfer stocks. We're talking, bonds, just investments overall. All of that stuff really is set to kind of change hands. And I think that for me, thinking about a lot of this stuff later on in life, it's really fascinating to me, this whole thing, I believe you got an earlier start wrapping your mind around a lot of this stuff, but I didn't really get into the growing my wealth, just looking at it from my perspective. I came into it late in life, and we'll talk a little bit about my story and kind of where I kind of spent most of my time the last 25, 30 years. But now it's, for me, there's a lot of stuff that's fascinating about all of this. And of course I have a real estate perspective because that's my background. But this involves also this, if we're thinking about wealth, it involves what's going on, things that are going on now with the crypto, the things that are going on now with even just, mortgage notes, things are going on with stocks and bonds, all of that stuff as well.
And I think it also layers into lifestyle. The baby boom generation, that may be the last generation where the bulk of that age cohort had full-time jobs with large employers up through their retirement. And they had retirement plans associated with those pensions. I mean, pensions
Yes.
are kind of going away.
Yes.
And so I think there's been a mind shift over towards financial independence, retire early, with a lot of the Gen Y, X, and Zers, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
has really become a big movement. And then a sub movement within that is Fat Fire, where they're really trying to optimize the amount of passive income, multiple streams of revenue when they retire. So,
Yeah. And what,
that's certain.
so just real quick. So what is the fat fire? What is that? Or fire? Because I've heard that before.
Sure. So FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And that's been a movement that's been building up over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. There's a pretty well-known blog within the movement called Mr. Money Mustache, and he was one of the first guys. And the principle really is based off of extreme frugality, not spending the bulk of the money that you're earning as a W-2 employee and investing it wisely so that over time you could build up your cash flow and your overall money that you've invested and invest and then retire very early and live off of what you've earned and invested. And Fat Fire is kind of a subset where people have a higher lifestyle and they don't want to live in extreme frugality, but they still want to retire early. So, those might be, doctors, for example. I have a cousin who's an oncologist, and he's relatively young oncologist, but he's already talking about, burnout and wanting to potentially, retire earlier than he might otherwise would at the end of a full medical career.
Has he been doing the fire thing as far as or is he really just investing and trying to just sock away money, but he hasn't really been trying to like fat fire the whole thing?
He's very interested in investing, but I don't think at this point he's certainly not doing the extreme frugality fire approach, but he is, looking at ways to invest and possibly, not work until he's 65, which I think there are a lot of people like us and younger people, Gen X, Y, and Zers, who are looking at changing up their lifestyle, 10xing their lifestyle. It's not just wealth, but it's also fitness and happiness and well-being.
Totally. Yeah, actually, that brings up something really good. So we were talking the other day, and you told me about this this fitness regimen that I think is just so hardcore. Can you describe that a little bit? Because this is 10x. Yeah. This is totally 10x, like to the umpteenth. Go ahead and just describe it real quick.
Yeah, so this is a little crazy, but the funny thing is my daughter, who's in college, said, "Oh, I'm going to do this 75 hard program." And she described it, and my wife and I thought, this sounds really interesting, and we need to lose a little weight. So why don't we do it too? So all three of us commit to doing it. There's a pretty well-known podcast host, Andy Frisella, who came up with this program, 75 Hard. So my wife and I ordered the book and we read it, and we all three agreed to go on the program. And ultimately what's happened is my daughter's dropped off and is no longer doing the program. So my wife and I
of course.
So she sucked us in and then bailed. But so the program entails you have to do 5 things every day. One is you have to take a photo of yourself so you can see you're slowly improving. 2 is you have to work out twice a day for at least 45 minutes. One of the workouts has to be outdoors. And then you have to read at least 10 pages a day of some type of nonfiction. and you have to drink a gallon of water a day. And the final one is whatever diet you're on, and this is really independent and whatever you feel is good for you, you have to stick with it every day. And you have to do all 5 of those things every day. If you miss any one of those things during any day, you have to start back at day one.
There's no
reset
gimmies.
the clock. There's no gimmies. You have to reset the clock. So it's supposed to build strength, grit, endurance, determination, stay-to-itedness. So
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
just a lose weight regimen, but it's kind of this whole mind shift regimen,
I love
which
it.
yeah.
So let's make sure to definitely let's post a link to the book. Any other, if there's a website, something like that, we'll put those in the show notes as well. That way, people can check that out. And I'm actually thinking about it. I'm gonna take a look at the
You should
book and
try
see.
it.
It's pretty hardcore. I don't know if I can get. So I don't know if people understand, but in our business, I take on a bulk of the underwriting duties. So
Right.
my big behind is sitting in a seat. Pretty much, 3/4 of the day I'm sitting on my ass, in front of spreadsheets. So getting out there and working out twice a day, once a day is difficult, but twice a day would probably be, and you have to do different ones, right? They can't be the same jump on the Peloton, or one has to be outside.
One has to be outside. So you can do both outside.
That's
you
right.
can do the same thing
That's
outside.
Right. That's right.
But you're thinking about doing something to 10x your fitness, aren't you? You're talking about doing a Spartan event.
Yeah, actually. And definitely. And so we're doing a team Spartan event. It's almost like if people don't know what the Spartan event, it's almost like a Tough Mudder type of thing where it's a obstacle course, and hopefully there's mud, but sometimes there isn't. And I think this one's 5 miles, and you go out with your friends and you run, you try to, go underneath barbed wire, and you go above, over walls, and you're running, and it's going to be nuts. And so I literally have to start training now for May. And so I think I've been running.
And there's a little bit of an elevation issue, right? Isn't it up in the mountains in Big Bear?
Yeah, exactly. So this is in Big Bear. So we're probably going to be about 7,000, 8,000 feet up. Right. And so that's going to even be tough too, because I'm gassed out from COVID. Right. my gas is like drained. But one thing that I used to do, and I've been waiting to kind of get back into once everything clears up, is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Yeah. And I know you tried that a little bit as well. And I trained for quite a long time up until a couple of years ago. But I did notice that my cardio, the wrestler's cardio, is way different than any other cardio that you could kind of develop, in my opinion. Not better, but just different, where you can find a way to find a core working set of gas to draw from, when you're really in deep with wrestling and jiu-jitsu and those types of martial arts. So we'll see. It's going to be definitely, I agree with you, definitely 10x on that end. And so you know what I'd love to do, man, is we've been working together almost 4 years now, and we've been business partners, for quite a long time. And I know your story, but I would love if you wouldn't mind just talk a little bit about, a little more in depth about kind of your story. It doesn't have to be long, but we'd love to just hear kind of where you came up. But I'd really love to hear that turning point that you had when you got into real estate or business.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. So I'm an attorney. I'm a licensed attorney, but at this point, I'm a full-time real estate investor. We have Prosperity CRE, and that's really the focus of my time. But I still have the license, and part of my role at Prosperity is bringing in that legal background. And but anyway, I started out as an attorney, and for many, many years, I litigated and did transactional work. But along the way, as an attorney, it was very easy to get a real estate broker's license. And so in the late 90s, I got a broker's license, And at the time, with a California real estate broker's license, you were also licensed to do loans. I don't know if that's still the case, but
Mm-mm.
so I started doing loans. I opened a loan company, and that was going well. And so then I hired some loan officers, and eventually I started an escrow company so I could do the escrow component and create an additional stream of revenue. And then eventually I opened up a real estate office, residential real estate, and brought in some real estate agents. And really the focus was to provide additional sources to bring in additional loans, but we also brought in revenue from the real estate office. So I had a couple of real estate offices at the peak, one in Southern California, one in Northern California. And then the crash hit, 2007, 2008. And we just were not closing anything. I remember we were struggling, and I was doing broker's opinion of value for short sales. I was doing short sales and anything we could to try to keep the doors open. It was very difficult, but eventually, after pulling money out of my pocket to pay the expenses and just not closing virtually anything during that crash, I ended up shutting down and going back into as an employee, and I went back into public affairs, did public affairs for a number of years, but eventually I got back into commercial real estate on the investment side.
Was that real quick, sorry to interrupt, that transition from owning a business back to the corporate side?
Yeah.
How did you feel about that at that time? Like, was it easy for you to kind of transition back and get into that, or like, what was that all about?
Well, it was a setback. I mean, I really enjoyed being an entrepreneur. And, I should also add, at the time, while I had the real estate business, I was also acquiring real estate investments. And what I was acquiring at the time were single family homes. So I was buying single family homes around the country. And at the time, a lot of other people were too, but I had single family homes in Florida, in Nevada, in Utah, et cetera, and in Arizona. And I held a number of those through the crash, and they ended up appreciating in value quite a bit. But when I came back into real estate out of private practice, I really focused on real estate investment, and that's when I bought the hotel in Austin, Texas.
Sweet, excellent.
Yeah. So for me, there wasn't like a pivotal shift where here's the point in time where I'm definitely going all in, transitioning from one thing to another. It's been a process. Other people, it's really, okay, they're going to make a shift and they see exactly when that shift occurs. But what about for you?
So I'm a little bit similar. I have a different background, but just a little bit similar, just in terms of kind of, I guess you'd call it floating into real estate, instead of like a hard kind of, this is what I'm going to do and this is it,
Yes.
So I actually, I was actually in college back in the, I'd say, early 90s. And just my first year, kind of messing around, trying to figure out what I was going to do. But I was also, because I grew up in Hollywood, I was also an actor, and I was just getting started. And right around, I say, I graduated in 87. So right around 90, I got an agent, I got into the business, and I started kind of working and having a little bit of success there. And so I decided to leave college and just really pursue the acting and entertainment business full time as a professional. It's a hard road for a lot of actors, but luckily and very thankfully, I did fairly well. And you can, if you're ever interested in kind of checking that out, you can just Google my name and you'll see some of my background on that end. So I won't go into a lot of stuff with that. But after about 30 years of being a professional in the entertainment industry, over the course of that, obviously, not always working. And there was a little bit of an entrepreneur thing going on when you're a freelance, artist in that way. You gotta hustle, right? Especially in the business part of it. But over the years, I was very lucky, and I became a working actor, and I was able to, make an income Not a lot. Didn't become a movie star or anything like that, but I was able to sock away pension credits with the Screen Actors Guild, which is great, over quite a number of years. So that has always been kind of with me, like, all right, great, I have this pension. This is fantastic. And also, just as a side note, throughout the years, I was always looking for different ways to make sure I could make money and survive when I wasn't working, but I didn't want to become a waiter or a waitress, anything like that. And that's how I fell very slowly into real estate and getting into, different facets of it, starting out like you in investing. I think I actually bought a piece of land on a land contract. You know those very well. And it was up in the mountains somewhere. And I bought it. I think I was paying like, I don't know, $200 a month to some lady who sold it to me. She did the note, the whole bit. And so, I had these grand plans of starting a Christmas tree farm up in the mountains. So already I was already like trying to be a visionary. It's 5 acres. It's awesome. So I'd say I got my license in 2004. So I'm a little bit behind you. I became a licensed realtor. I was doing loans before the crash. And lucky, I actually, while I was doing that, just before the crash, I stopped. I basically closed out all of my loans, and I actually gave 1 or 2 listings that I had back to my broker, and basically said, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't want to be a residential real estate agent. I don't want to drive people around in my car to open houses. I just don't. It's just not my. It's not my jam, And so, that was I think that was in early 2008, mid 2008, and then all hell broke loose.
Oh yeah,
like pretty crazy.
It got rough.
It got rough. It even got rough in the entertainment industry, but real estate was just crazy. And I was just sitting back watching my colleagues that I had worked with really, really suffer. And I actually feel like I kind of got out right at the right time, personally, luckily, very luckily. So after the crash, just kind of stayed away. And then right around 2012, I started getting the itch again. And I went back into, looking into wholesaling, trying to build a little bit of a war chest, get to wholesaling houses and trying to get those 10 grand a pop, put some money in the bank. And then right around early 2013, I actually met an ex-Wall Streeter who was teaching commercial real estate finance. And that really opened up a whole world for me in terms of how big the real estate world can be, and that it's not just limited to residential real estate. And so from there, it's opened up my company, TriSource Capital, and then during that time, I really had a moment for myself where I was kind of sitting around and going, okay, I'm a broker again. I'm doing loans, commercial loans. So there's a potential for me to do really, really well. But I also felt that I didn't really have, I don't know the word for it, but I think, the best word I can find is I didn't have ownership in anything. Yeah. Right. I didn't have ownership.
Well, brokerage, it's very transactional, right? There's a payday and then you start over at zero again and you got to go find the next loan. Right?
Keep what you kill. That was the whole thing. And so one of the big things, I was making connections in the commercial real estate side with capital providers, not only lenders, but equity providers and family offices and things like that. And the overarching theme that was going on coming out of the crash was that there was going to be a big giant, there was going to be another crash possibly. And then there was there's going to be a downturn at some point. And that's proven not to have been true, almost 10 years later. But so my thinking was, I don't want to be a broker during the downturn. I don't want to have to be chasing deals when it's really, really slow. That's when, that's really when the hardcore guys really rise to the top, right? And the people that aren't doing so well, that kind of fall off. And so I'm like, if I want to take advantage during a downturn of my connections, I need to get a track record of ownership. aside from that, I was looking at this is kind of a turning point for me. I was looking at my pension, kind of calculating it out, calculating when I, retire and the whole bit. And it's great for, a lower middle class kind of nice, amount, but it wasn't enough. I just couldn't see how it could be enough when you really kind of, when you, I don't know, when you discount it all the way back to now, it's like, there's not going to be enough, And so I wanted more. And so the ownership, the more I thought about it, the ownership side of things kind of really seemed like the path. And so that's when I got into exploring multifamily real estate and syndication, commercial real estate and syndication, buying big buildings, which is part of what we do, just go out and buy big buildings along with our investor partners, and really work to become a professional on that end. And so,
and what's interesting is I think both of us started out on the residential end. I mean, you were wholesaling residential. I was buying residential single family homes, which, look, most people that get into real estate, that's how they start. They'll either own a home and keep it and rent it out, or they'll buy a home as an investment property.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And what's interesting is we both realized at a certain point, and I think a lot of people go through this, that you can really increase your net worth and build your multiple streams of revenue a lot quicker once you scale up into larger properties. I mean, there's lots and lots of benefits to scaling up into larger commercial properties.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're sharing the ownership with lots of other people, you get certain economies of scale that just you don't get with a single family home.
And that goes back to the 10X, idea, right? There's a real component of kind of maximizing that whole process. And you could do the monopoly way, but if you want to 10X it, you really have to think of what are the quickest ways that you can grow legitimately, and accelerate, because people do it every single day. And the big Sam Zells of the world have done it, almost exactly. They may have a little bit of more, at least for me, they have a little more pedigree in terms of schooling and network and stuff like that. But the process is the same, and the acceleration is the same. And
by the way, I highly recommend Sam Zell's autobiography. That guy is a hoot. He's really a very interesting character.
Okay.
It's something we could put in the show notes.
Yeah, let's definitely do that.
Yeah.
So, and then one thing and we're going to talk more about some of this stuff on the show as we go along. But one thing I love about how you're approaching a lot of your investments is, you have your hand in a lot of things. But you're into crypto right now, and it's all the rage. And I know we've had our conversations, because I'm not quite buying it yet. I've dipped my foot in a little bit, and then I've sold it. Then I actually lost my wallet. You were freaking out on me.
Well, there's like billions of dollars of crypto that have been lost in wallets that little jump drive wallets that people have lost, or they've forgotten their code.
And I'm still, I know this kind of the sense of it, but I'm still on the fence about really, really committing significant dollars. Yeah. And I know that you're further along in that process with me. So it's going to be really interesting, not only to see what happens on that front, but to talk to more people and see if they can. I mean, you have a good way of convincing me into things, but just you're not convincing me on this one. So seeing if other people can help, along with that.
Well, I'd love to have, some people who really know crypto. I'm a very, novice at crypto, but, I remember it crashed in 2018, right? It peaked in Bitcoin peaked in 2017. And I held it. I was buying in 2017, and I think my average buy-in was around 14,000, and I watched it come all the way down to $3,000. And I was thinking, you're such an idiot. Why did you buy this stupid Bitcoin? But I just held it. And now you're such a genius.
That's so great.
Good it's
for
ridiculous.
You, man. Good for you. Yeah, I've been tiptoeing around, and I know you just, I don't know.
It's such a different game. It's so incredibly volatile. But when we talk about Gen Zers, I think there's a huge percentage that are looking at alternative investments like crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and alternative coins along that along those lines. But I will say this, and maybe our little podcast can help in this way for kids that are listening. Right. It's really kind of scary, some of the schemes that I see, on social media on how they're trying to get rich. And I know that we all grew up with get rich quick schemes and really, but it's really, in my opinion, it's really accelerated because something can catch on TikTok or something like that. And then all of a sudden it's a thing. And then it starts penetrating into your world. Like, oh yeah, I had somebody approach me for that. That's just weird, and it's just very strange. I don't know. So I'm hoping that maybe.
Well, and it has a huge impact too. I mean, if you look at the volatility in the stock market, a lot of it's attributable to like the Reddit pages where people are pumping different
the meme investors
stocks. Exactly.
Totally. Yeah. And believe me, listen, I'm a member of some of those Reddit communities, and I watch it, and I actually have a Robinhood account, and so I didn't really partake in the GameStop, all that craziness that was going on in late 2020, early 2021. But and I know that, it's not that I know any better to say, hey, you should be putting your money away into cash flowing real estate like this, because young people don't want to necessarily hear that, right? And hopefully we can find some sort of bridge so that there's a little bit of sense without really pounding into them. Hey, you got to save your money. Hey, you got to invest for your retirement, because when you're 20 years old and 19 years old, you don't care about retirement. You don't care. But you want a 10X. You want a
10X. And there is something to be said for the the younger you are, the more risk you can handle.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a really good point, actually.
If you don't have family obligations, if you don't have a mortgage, you can handle that risk if you're willing to take it on. But I do think you need to have some diversity. I don't know how much diversity, but some diversity. So, maybe not all of your money's in crypto.
We have a few people that I think we're going to look to see if we can get on the show that I think are doing things that are Gen Zers, younger people that are really kind of finding their way into a little bit more traditional investments, but still taking advantage of the propensity to kind of risk a little bit more than say I would or you would, and so and there could be some pathways through that if we have those conversations here and their peers are listening,
Absolutely.
So, and then, I think that's about it, man. I think that, this is going to be a good show. I think this is a good start.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's really going to be fun.
Next couple episodes will be fantastic. We got some good guests, so we'll have those coming up soon. And I really look forward to our conversations, and it's gonna be good.
Awesome. All right. Stay tuned for the next one.
I love it.
10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you, and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.